Good morning, and welcome to obviously we're having this morning. Obviously, you're here at the inaugural conference, and this morning we're going to have a unique opportunity to hear from professionals. When I say professionals, obviously, everyone in their own right has come across different questions that have been challenged, given over to them. And I'd like to introduce the panel. First and foremost, Rav Tversky, Shlita, Ornsteipel Rebbe, who comes here with a cadre of experience, not only being a Rav in the Kehila in Flatbush here, but also coming from Denver, Colorado. His family comes from an illustrious heritage and has been involved in outreach for many, many years. Rabbi Chaim Sampson, who is the director of Project Inspire, comes with a plethora of experience in Kiruv, working in Eish Torah, Eish New York, now Project Inspire, and really has molded this whole organization to where it is right now. And he has a plethora of experience with regards to Kiruv outreach, questions, etc. And last and not least, Rabbi Ben-Zion Klatsko, who has built an organization called Shabbat.com and many other wonderful organizations he's been involved in. But he comes from just knowing his house up in, in Muncie, where on a given Shabbos there could be, I don't know, 20 people? How many, 60 people, 70 people, 100 people? And he's dealt with issues that have plagued Klal Yisrael. So we'd like to open up the discussion today with questions that you might feel that you would like to ask. We do have cards that if anybody doesn't want to or wants to, jot something down and give out cards. Can I ask you to just give out cards to anybody? If you want to just give it in, anonymously. I'd like to ask the first question and open it up, and then I'll open up to the panel, and I will sit back and try to enjoy. The mic is not on.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You can do it.
If you do it, it'll be helpful. Hello? Great, thank you very much. So, the first question I'd like to ask, somebody gave me this question this morning, is the following. And I'll try to pose it and let everybody else, let the panelists answer it. Knowing that Klal Yisrael is facing a tremendous amount of assimilation today, and obviously it's our achrayus to reach out, where do I triage? How do I make a difference in my understanding of who really to reach out to? And to that effect, whether somebody's intermarried already, is it my achrayus to reach out to them, to their spouse? I mean, it's a loaded question, and how to deal with all the moving parts of that question. So I'll open up to the panelists, whoever wants to answer that, and take it from there.
I mean, it has really got. You have two questions really. One question is triage.
I'm going to give
Okay. Okay. It sounds. I mean, your question is really two questions. One question is triage. Meaning triage means if I have so many people that I'm going to who am I going to start with? So that's already your first question. A lot of assumptions to it, which we'll deal with. The second question is what about an intermarried a person who's intermarried? So let's start the first question first. First question is triage. I mean, halavai, we would be in a situation where everybody who's sitting in the audience here is dealing with a situation of so many people that I'm reaching out to. Where do I start with first? So let's go behind the assumption is whoever you should be reaching out to, right? Meaning, some people are not quite there yet. Meaning, Rabbi, those who heard Rav Moshe Tuvili speak this morning about how somebody pulled up in front of his house on Shabbos and he reached out to him and he brought him to shul, was a beautiful example of what we all should be doing. That in our daily lives, there are people that we're meeting, if you have the right glasses on, which means that this could be a Friar Yid that I could reach out to, that you will see them all the time. So this is the first thing. You have to realize that there are co-workers, there are people who pull up in front of your house, there are people that you meet in the subway, there are people that there's relatives that there's people that you don't even know that you really do know, that you should be reaching out to. So the first thing is that we should get to, that's the first base, is that right? In this, we call that first base, or first wicket, or something. In England they say, we call about wickets. But once you've got to the point where you're reaching, if you really are those who this question is shaykh, you've got so many people that you're reaching out to, so then really the question becomes, people are drowning in front of you, and you can't save them all. Who do you save? So the question is, if you've got a guy who's drowning in front of you, and if you try and save him, he's going to pull you down as well, leave that guy alone. You've got a guy who's like, please help me, I need you. So then go for that guy. Meaning, there are people that sometimes are less easy to help. They're less open, even though we say that every Yid's neshama is yearning for meaning and yearning for relationship with Kodesh Baruch Hu, yearning for Torah, which is true. Sometimes people have more blocks than others, and therefore if you have someone that that if you reach out to him, he will start learning with you, or she will start learning with you, or they will come for Shabbos, and they're gonna. So then go for the people that you think that you could really pull out the water, so to speak, and you can save. Bearing in mind that everything that you do, any mitzvah, anything that they do, they start learning with you, they start coming for Shabbos, they start learning the laws of Lashon Hara, is beautiful. We shouldn't just think unless they become frum, so then they're not worth it. Every single thing that you do. But I would say that in terms of triage, where you feel that you will have a hashpah is the place that you should start with. I'm sorry, this is going on. The second question, in terms of intermarried. And look, this is a Kabbalah that I have from Rav Noach. I don't really heard said differently. An intermarried Yid is a Tinuk Shenishba, doesn't know any better. They're as Jewish as you and I. Right? Any mitzvah that an intermarried Yid does is beautiful. In fact, in some ways, and I've said this to people who are intermarried, I say, you know what? For me, it's easy to commit key mitzvah. I live in Passaic, I have a Baruch Hashem, and I'm from family. For me, I do a mitzvah, so it's, of course, what's it worth? It's worth a lot. But if you do a mitzvah, when you're intermarried, and you can't, do you know how much more that is worth in the eyes of the Almighty? And sometimes people feel that. An intermarried person might feel that they're kind of cut off. They kind of still feel a sense of connection to their Jewish identity, but they might feel a little cut off from it. But by your validating that they are, as the Kodesh Baruch Hu loves them, just like they love you, you're still a child of the Almighty. And anything that you do in your situation is a beautiful thing, then that gives them a feeling, often a desire that they want to, and you should try to, they could give a whole shir on this, but try to be makar of them as much as to be makar of them as much as you can. If that means sometimes you've got to invite their family, Rav Noach always used to say, you should invite them. Obviously, you have to ask halachas about Shabbos and so forth, prepare your family and so forth. But that was the mahalach that he had, which I was makabel. Anybody else want to? We can go to the next question if you like.
I have a slightly different perspective, and it comes from life's experience. Because for 20 years, the Kehillah in Denver, the Avodah was 90% Kiruv. Sure. I could say those 20 years of being in the trenches, fighting, it was called hand-to-hand combat, was barely good training for the challenges of being in the middle of Brooklyn. If we think that there is any less kiruv in those who are in our own community, who have already become jaded and lost the significance and the beauty of Torah, and they're living their lives filled with this emptiness, despair, depression, and not knowing how to talk to their children, not knowing how to talk to their spouses, not knowing how to guide themselves, how to lift themselves. Unfortunately, we see, too many people walking into shul, walking out exactly as they came in. No change, no inspiration. And that's people who grew up and went to yeshivas, went to Beis Yaakov. So, all the kirv that we will ever do in the world will be not enough in order to change the wave so much of assimilation, as much as we need to give chizuk to what Torah really gives us in the frum world, every single day, so that we can actually talk to somebody else and say, Torah is such a beautiful thing, davening is such a great, inspiring experience. And so few of us have that in our daily lives. It's no wonder that it's hard to reach out to those who have no association and say, I have something beautiful to offer to you. We doubt ourselves. Just want to point out, there's a famous mice of the Beditcher Barov who used to come every morning to davening, and his Birchas HaShachar was an inspiration all by itself. And one day he walks in and everybody's ready for his Birchas HaShachar, and he starts, and his arms up in the air, and his voice trembling, and his koich is fully into every bracha. And they noticed that he skipped the bracha Shelo Yasani Goy. So afterwards, the Olam came to him and says, Rebbe, you missed the bracha. He said, this is where several ways the story is repeated. He says, I got up this morning and I was ready to I washed Nagel Masa and I wanted to say, Rabban Shalom, Mayda Ani Lefanecha. And I said, for what? Who am I that I should be able to think HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Do I think I have mitzvahs and my tovim? I see how inadequate I am, and the Rebbeinu Shalom was so great, and I have nothing with which to even stand before the Rebbeinu Shalom. And I did not know how to move. But I looked out the window, and I saw a guy walking by. And I said, but I'm a part of Klal Yisrael. I have Torah. I have something that gives me a value far and above and beyond whatever I can accomplish. Baruch atah Hashem shelo yasani goy. Says, I didn't have to repeat it later. Are we happy? Are we celebrate every single day? Shasani Yisrael, that I'm a Yid, that I have a tremendous closeness to Kadosh Baruch Hu. If we don't, it's going to be hard to be Makarev another Jew if there's not that simcha, that joy that gives us that inspiration every day.
Okay. Question? Yeah, go ahead. Shia.
So my question is, as a follow-up to Rabbi Korsky's comments, how does one inspire from people that grew up in the system, and you approach them and you see that although they dress from, they don't necessarily believe or care about what they grew up with, they just do it either because it's good socially or because they just are ashamed to leave the fold, but their core inside, they really don't believe in what they grew up with.
See ya.
See you, man.
No, let's start with her. I'll have to. Good.
I think that though people sometimes say it to me tongue in cheek, but they know that when they walk into shul, they get a hug. Because if you give somebody and tell them, I'm so happy that you're here, and that your being here is so important today. I don't care what time they walked in. It doesn't make a difference if they walk in. Whenever they show up, it's good. And they're given a simcha, they're given a smile, and they said, it's that who you are and what you have is beautiful to offer. Then you give them something that says, you don't know, wow, you know, I have something that's special about me. Maybe my davening will be special today. We walk in, and I say that unfortunately, we walk into most of the places, the shuls that we walk in, it's rare to get even a shalom aleichem, let alone a hug. I sometimes come back away from being away from Shabbos and say, I'm thinking, I'm hungry for a hug. Only because their willingness to reach out and say shalom aleichem to another from Yid seems to be such a tremendous nisayon. To greet another Jew with a breite Shabbos on the street, or a Shabbat Shalom, even some people who don't look like they're Jewish. Especially our neighborhood, we've got a lot of Russian Jews that are wandering around and they're walking the dog Shabbos morning. You give them a breite good Shabbos, and they're so happy. Allah has come for each one of us to be able to say, Hillel, having mitalmidov shel Aaron HaKohen oyev shalom v'oyev shalom u'mekarvim labim shebashamayim. Kiruv is not a new institution. It's just an expression of how we need to focus on that connection between ourselves and other Jews. Then they become inspired. You give them something to hold on to, something that gives them value. That's the first level of inspiration. When they walk in the door, do they feel happy to be there?
I find it interesting that recently, when I've been to these kind of Kiruv conferences that are supposed to be targeting Kiruv V'chaykim, they very often evolve into Kiruv Kroyim. And I was looking at your nodding heads as Rabbi Twersky answered the first question to just reaffirm that we understand that there's an issue, and maybe we're even questioning the entire premise of reaching out when reaching in has become such a big issue. Is that correct? Okay. So really, there are two approaches to this. One approach is to change courses and to start saying, you know what, let's start shoring up our own defenses. Let's start making the from community healthier, and then afterwards we'll resume reaching out. As my very wise mother-in-law used to say, if the heater is not warm, it can't radiate heat. So our heaters have to be warm. So that's one approach. One approach is to ignore the Kiruv V'chaykim, and maybe let's take a 5-year hiatus and start putting all of our koiches towards Kiruv Kroyim. I don't believe that's the answer, because I think that Kiruv V'chaykim and Kiruv Kroyim both have the same shirish, and by doing one properly, you will end up addressing the other. I had the zchus of speaking for the Belzer Hasidim about a month and a half ago, right? And we mentioned something over there that I'm just going to tell you the premise behind it, and I think maybe perhaps this will answer your question. We speak about trying to bring people back to Yiddishkeit, but we have a difficult time defining what we're trying to bring them back to. Because if we're trying to bring them back to the religion of Judaism, then essentially it's like being born in New York and being a Yankees fan. I happen to be born Jewish, so yay Jews. And if I had been born in Boston, I'd be a Red Sox fan. So I happen to be born Jewish, so I like the Jews. But if I were born Hindu, I'd be saying yay Hindus, and I'd be at a Hindu Kiruv conference, correct? So if it's all about religion, then you're right. You're right. We've got issues that we have to be addressing. But the thing is that if you look in the whole Torah, you will find the word religion is absent. In every place that religion could be or should be inserted, it's left out. The only real time that the word religion is used is in the Megillah when Haman said, "V'dasayim shanois." They're just a different religion. They're another religion. But he was wrong. We are not. We're not a religion, but we're a relationship. And I make my kids say this every week. We're not a religion, we're a relationship. And that is the key. That is a linchpin to getting back on track, both from Yidden and how to bring other people who are not from into the fold. If we teach them religion, then we're no better than the missionary on the street. If we teach them that they have a relationship, that the words that they almost all know, Shema Yisrael, include the Ahavta es Hashem Elokecha. Hashem wants to be in love with you, and Hashem wants you to be in love with Him. Then everything changes. Shabbos is not, now I got to turn off my cell phone. Now I have to close my computer. Shabbos is romance. Shabbos is about going out on a date, taking a shower, putting on your beautiful clothing like you're going out, putting out a white tablecloth, pouring some wine and lighting some candles. Shabbos is a candlelit dinner. come my beloved, my bride, my princess, my queen. I want to be in a relationship with you. I don't want to be in a religion with you. That Shabbos. If we teach that kind of Yiddishkeit, who's going to say no? That's when people have the minhag of saying Shir Hashirim, because ani l'doidim v'doivili. Yafasi, Rayasi. It's beauty. It's relationship. If we teach relationship, then it's the same kiruv to Rechoikim and Kroivim. And part of relationship is like Rabbi Tursky said. Are you happy to be in the relationship? Then it's pashut. I don't have to tell you to be happy to be in a religion. That's forced. But to be in a relationship, that's part and parcel. It goes hand in hand. If you're not happy, then you're not in a relationship. We daven 3 times a day because in a normal relationship, you connect 3 times a day. You wake up in the morning and say hello. The afternoon, you check in at least once. And the evening, you enjoy each other's company. You have dinner together. It's relationship. So I think that's sort of a long-winded answer to your question. Teach relationship, we'll get back on track. Teach religion, we're not going to have success with Rechoikim and not with Kroivim either.
Just add just a short. I agree with beautiful things that were said here. Obviously, all kiruv starts with Oha Ivas Abrius and Makarav the Torah. If you want to bring anyone close to Torah, it's got to start with Ava, with love, right? Rabbi Twersky is the master, the Rebbe of love, and so you feel it when he speaks. But I think that in our teaching, one of the things that I found through teaching kiruv training programs, really which is designed for kiruv krovim, there's been a couple of reactions that we've had commonly. One is people come up and say, well, I don't know about the kiruv rechokim, but this changed my life. Meaning that we need to know the answers for ourselves. And it's not just the kid who's off the derech that needs the chizuk, it's all of us, because there's a reason why that kid's off the derech. It's not just because of him. It's that the community itself needs chizuk. We need to know the answers. We need to understand that it's about relationship. We need to understand all the questions that our children ask us, that we say, oh, that's a good question, or if we're lucky, we'll say that's a good question, otherwise tell them to be quiet, because we don't know the answer. We need to face that as a community. We need to face the questions so that we could answer them themselves. We need to develop the attitudes of ava, of acceptance, of not like, if you're not doing exactly what I do, the way I do, then the kid's an outcast, or he feels shunned. One of the most basic things that we teach people in kiruv rechokim is that you have to accept people. That no matter where they are, they're a child of the Rebbeinu Shalom. You should love them and you should get right. And this kid that's going off the derech, how does he feel? Do you think he feels judged? Of course he feels judged. So by learning the answers for kiruv rechokim, we learn for ourselves what we need to do for ourselves, for our children, for our family, and so on and so forth. So definitely go hand in hand. So I'm not just saying, we believe that if people knew the answers and knew how to be makarev rechokim, you learn very, very quickly how to be makarev and what people need to know and the attitudes that we need to have in order to be makarev krovim as well.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've asked this question
It's all right, it's okay.
of kiruv people, but I've not gotten an answer.
Repeat the
I
question.
understand that it's easier to do kiruv with someone who's negative, who's on drugs, but what happens when you have a sibling who grew up in the same family? Everyone is full, fathered from the beginning, he's not on drugs, he's a wonderful person, his children are lawyers, but they're not going to marry Jews. We've tried everything. No one is giving me an answer. How do you even approach it? He comes to our hasanas, he's very nice, very good, but I don't know this.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat that question, and somebody else asked a very similar question, so why don't I read that question, and it will segue into the next group of answers. I've been frum for around 5 years, and this is very similar to your question. So I hope that the panelists will answer both questions. Your question was somebody in the family who's just not believing in it, and how do you get them to connect with the rest of the family? A big zero, not connected. And the other question, which I would like to, I guess both questions are interconnected. That's why I'm asking the next question, if you don't mind. Is that person wrote, I've been frum for around 5 years, and the relationship between my immediate family and myself has been a real roller coaster ever since. I got married 1 year ago. It's been an adjustment for my family who lives out of town. just last night, my brother told me, okay, so we're talking about family, okay, that he is not necessarily looking to marry a Jewish girl, okay? How should my husband and I respond and react to the brother's casualty about the possibly ending of his family's lineage? What should we do? And that, to your question, is that if you have somebody in the family who is not connected, how should you deal with it? So I think it's both connected, and if the panelists feel a sense that they can handle this, I'd like to give the microphone over to them. Okay? You're on board? Thank you.
Who's going to start? You want to go?
Let me just say one thing.
Yeah, take it.
And then I'll give it over to Rabbi Tversky and Rabbi Samson. It says that the Chumash says that Aaron HaKohen was given the ability to light the menorah. That was his matana from Hashem. So in Parshas Balosa it says, "Vayas Kain Aaron." Vayas Kain Aaron, and as Rashi says, "Lo shino," he didn't change. It says like every day he would go and he light the menorah every day the same way, and that's how I would interpret the Rashi. Lo shino, he didn't change it. It says Vayas Kain Aaron. We don't have to know that Aaron did that. Yes, so he did it every day the same way. Vayas Kain Aaron. So did Aaron HaKohen, it says, the Mishnah says, Tamida Shal Aaron HaKohen, Ohev Shalom Arodei Shalom, Ohev Esabrios Mekarvim LaTorah, right? He's the ultimate Kiruv person, whether Rechokim, Krovim. So, what's with Aaron HaKohen? Did he ever go to Project Inspire? Did he ever go to Eish Torah? Did he ever go to NCSY? Did he ever go to any wonderful Kiruv organization that exists? Shabbat Takam, Chulu B'chulu? Vayas Kain Aaron. Vayas Kain, he was positive. He was positive. Cain, use that word as Cain, as being yes, positive, as opposed to being a negative personality. So to start off, I would say that as Rabbi Samson says, is a connection. As Rabbi Tversky says, a connection to a person. They have to feel you have a genuine interest in the person. And then with that, I'll just hand it over to the panelists.
All right, so, I mean, again, these are really two separate questions, but they definitely overlap. But let's start with the second question first, even though you know the first question. But the second question, I think, is if you have someone in your family who's a relative who's, especially a man who's talking about intermarrying, look again, you have to know each person and what the situation, generally speaking, you're dealing with, I didn't get it. It's from a from family or not a from? Not a from. No, the second, that was first. The second question.
Second one is not a from.
So you're dealing again with somebody who's a Tinnik but unfortunately, he's amongst the other 50% of Jews today who are doing this. So it's not like this is a big chiddush, even though it shocks us when we hear it every time, and it should be something we don't get used to. At the same time, unfortunately, this is what's going on. This is Klal Yisrael today. So what should our response be? You've got to try to help him. You have to try to help him as much. But what's going to be effective to help? I've generally found, and I think I would say this is true for both questions, that the concept of cutting someone off and saying, I'm going to have nothing to do with them because in this door does not work, right? And especially when you're dealing with certainly a Tinnik Shenishba, it's why do it? Why do it? I remember somebody calling me on the phone about the fact that they're having a difficulty with their daughter who's intermarrying or whatever, and the daughter won't speak to him. Why? Because he cut her off. He could have cut her off. So I can't even get into a conversation. So, I was, who told you to cut her off? It was a difficult conversation because it was like, I can understand she won't want to speak to you if you told her that she's going to have nothing to do with your family. Now, obviously, that's a shikol das, meaning if you really understood that by cutting off she would come back, so then try, if you really think that's your best mahalach. But I'm just saying, in general, my experience from a lot of kiruv, Baruch Hashem, is that in this generation, if you cut people off, they don't feel accepted, they don't feel loved, and then they merachate themselves from you, and you've just lost that relationship that we're talking about to bring them back. So the first thing that in general is to try to maintain the relationship there are many things that can be done, and again, we haven't got enough time in terms of, there are books that can be read with a person who's intermarrying. There's a book by Doron Kornbluth, Why Marry Jewish. It's a very good book. It brings out a lot of reasons why, 50% of people get divorced. Unfortunately, in this generation, intermarried couples, it's 75%, which means someone gets intermarried, there's a 1 in 4 chance that they'll stay together. Better stick with someone who you've got more of a chance of. There are many reasons why a person can be encouraged to there could be that this person, is not a good person for them outside of religion. Could be that this person, they're infatuated, they're not really good for them, they're a selfish person. Sometimes, usually though, if you stay in the position of friendship, where you're a friend, sometimes hard with it when it's family, but then it's a pesach to you to be able to understand them, what's going on with them. If you can get a person to learn, sometimes, in terms of people intermarrying, if a person if you're able to say to someone, listen, it's your life. You have to, it's your decision. I can't make your life decisions for you. But, make a decision from knowledge. You can go to Israel for a week to learn. I'll organize the whole thing. Then you fundraise it, or you speak to Rabbi Klatsko, he'll get them there. I guarantee you. And if you get it to go and learn a little bit. Go and learn. Go to Israel. Sometimes the experience of being by the Kosel and being by a family for Shabbos and being in Israel, I would say is the most powerful, transformative experience. If you can get someone to have an experience like that, and that would it would be true for anybody. But I would say that on both questions, the first question as well, it's hard. It's not. There's no simple answers. There's no here's the take this pill and they're going to become frum. It's not like that. Unfortunately, it's not like that. But I would just tell you one point, and this is just from experience from my own. Baruch Hashem, I was zocher to become frum myself when I was 17 years old. I went to Aish Torah to get my brother out. Right? That was my story. Baruch Hashem, I came back and I became wearing a kippah after 6 weeks. Baruch Hashem, my last year of high school. My best and oldest friend, after I went back to yeshiva, I learned for a while, he said to me, listen, Chaim, I'm ready to be your friend, as long as you say nothing to me about Judaism, nothing, I don't want to hear anything. Okay, he's my friend. The relationship is not dependent on me getting him somewhere, he's my friend. I said, no problem. Right? This was when I was maybe 19 years old. Yeah? Baruch Hashem, we stayed friends. He came on an Aish Torah trip when I was working for Aish London when he was probably in his 30s. He married a girl on the trip, right? Still not from. About 3 or 4 years ago, I went back to England and I went out for supper with him. He's my friend, right? At that point, as we're talking, he says, I said, what's new? He said, he started going to Hilchos Shabbos shit. I nearly fell off my seat. I said, you started doing what? Hilchos Shabbos. The next year we went out for supper. He pulled out an art scroll sheet. So what do I have to say again in the morning? This was how many years later? This is over 25 years later. Because I kept the relationship. Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, he's coming back, He's coming back. He's Shemish Shabbos now, and Baruch Hashem, he's growing. So sometimes we just have to be patient. It's, we would want it to be that, and it can be extremely frustrating and painful when it's your family, right? But my sense is, if you understand, you want to keep the relationship because that's your best chance of keeping them involved, number one. Number two is, what is it that you try to understand? What is blocking them? What do you think could be the experience that could help them? Is there somebody that you could get them involved with? Usually, as a family member, usually the last person is really going to have that hashbah on them. So is there a way of introducing, is there somebody else that that could be a friend, or there's a way of getting them involved? You have to think, what's really blocking this person? What's really pushing them away? How can you get them past that block, which might take some consultation with people? What's a specific thing? Sometimes that can help. And what could there be an experience that they could have that could help them? Anybody else? Or next question.
Rabbi Sampson's answer is right on target, because having been started Kiruv, if they call it Kiruv, before the word was coined. Because back in 1970, my father separated himself from the shul where he had been rov for 25 years and said, I don't think this is the answer for the next generation. And he made his own bais medrash, started bringing in college kids before there was such a word as outreach. And that was the year that I got married and came and spent the next 2 years helping my father's talk to college kids and to adults long before. So there's a long view. And the long view is exactly as Rabbi Sampson said. If you have the patience and the persistence and you keep on inviting them and leaving yourself open for them to keep on searching, to keep that connection, it works. I just want to give you just a little anecdote of a story that happened to us. We were doing Tashlich in Denver, Colorado, a little lake nearby, and there's this Yidel with a kashketel, an older Yid with a kashketel watching us. We're doing Tashlich, and we do it Shlosh Esrei Midos, middle of the Aseret Shemei Tshuva. And he comes over to us, starts speaking to us in Yiddish. He said, "So du Chassidim in Denver?" So, the Chassidim in Denver. He said, "Yeah." I said, "Where's the shul?" I told him, 2 blocks away. He says, "Oh," he says, "I just moved in from Omaha, Nebraska." Ended up, he was Warren Buffett's personal tailor.
Oh my goodness.
A Yid from Lodge. Ended up with his wife. They survived the Holocaust and went and lived in Omaha, Nebraska. He was a Schneider. So then he told us the story. He says, "How did I survive?" He says, "My tati gewen shoichet, the breeder, my brother was a ruv." He says, "The family were Talmidei Chachamim. I was 14 years old and I didn't want to go back to yeshiva. And so my father told me," he says, "Wirst nicht gehen lernen, aber leider gehen ist dir nicht sein. You're not going to let you go without being busy." And he gave me a job to be an apprentice by a tailor. The Nazis, Yimach Shimon, walked into Lodge. They asked everybody what their profession was. I told them, "I'm a Schneider, I'm a tailor." They took me out to a work camp, and I spent the rest of the war making uniforms for the German generals. Him and his wife. He says, and then we understood that the Germans were about to leave, and then probably would mean that they would kill all of us. So me and my wife fled into the forest. He says, "My father didn't survive, my brothers didn't survive, the Talmidei Chachamim of the families didn't survive." He says, "Why did I survive? Because I didn't want to learn Torah." He says, "Do you know what the Rebbeinu Shem's cheshbon is?" So he says, "Ask children." And now children who are going to the Einiklach, who are going to now to the day schools, right? We have no concept of that length of time. We are very impatient. We want to see results immediately. But Torah brings Klal Yisrael back. You have to have a very long view. What we know the answer is, as Rabbi Samson said, keep the door open and making sure that they feel that they are absolutely loved unconditionally. And accepted unconditionally, because that is the key. That who knows in which door they will be coming back.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not going to belabor this because there may be 3 answers to one question. It'd be hard to remember. Chachma B'Goyim Timon, there's a fellow by the name of Stephen Covey who says that relationships work like a bank account. This is one of the most important things I ever heard, and I see it b'poil day after day. If you deposit $100 in the bank and then write out a check for $10,000 and try to cash it, they will probably say no. And they'll say no because you didn't deposit $10,000, so you cannot withdraw $10,000. Relationships work exactly this way. We make deposits in relationships, and those deposits one day will allow us to make a withdrawal. But if we don't make deposits and then expect to make withdrawals, we're going to be very disappointed. Very often, I am called by people who have a relative who is getting married to a guy next week. Could Rabbi stop them? He loves her. They've got a wedding plan. So I said, "Have you been in touch with them?" "Oh, I once sent them a Kiruv book." I don't even know if that qualifies for the $100. You know? If you make deposits, one day you can make withdrawals. Now, it sounds to me like in the situation that you're in, you say one day you think that they will marry Goyim.
I'm talking about a man who's in his 60s. His children, they're not going to marry Jews.
So the children, it sounds like you could still make deposits because their kids are not yet intermarried or even engaged. Is that correct? Okay. So make deposits. Now, what are deposits? Don't shove Judaism down their throat. People don't like other people to force them to do things. Be warm, be friendly. I have a younger brother who's pretty well known. He's known as Ace Klatzko. He works with kids at risk. He is a magician. And before he was ever married, he was a young man, he came to visit me in UCLA. And we had by us a student not from, his name was Jonathan Cohn. And he came to visit me, Jonathan, when my brother Ace was visiting me from New York. And they were schmoozing it up at the dining room table. And somehow the conversation turned to a schnapps called Goldschlager. It's got little gold pieces. Little Goldschlager. What is it, the cinnamon, right? I love Goldschlager. Later on the day, I went out with my brother shopping. We actually went to a thrift store, like a secondhand store. And as we're leaping through, some clothing, he sees a T-shirt, a Goldschlager T-shirt. So he says, "We got to buy this for Jonathan." It didn't even occur to me. "You got to buy it for Jonathan." I said, "Great." So we bought it for Jonathan. He calls up Jonathan that evening. He's, "Jonathan, come back over. I got something for you." He gives it to Jonathan, and Jonathan breaks down crying. Jonathan says, "I want to tell you, I come from an abusive home. My father used to beat my mother in front of my eyes, and used to beat my younger brother. But I tried to stop him, so I would always jump in between to capture the beating instead of my younger brother, because he could have injured my brother." So that was what kind of family I grew up in, and never once did I receive a present. Never once. This is the first present I ever received. Jonathan today is living in Yerushalayim. He's a Frum Yid, and his journey began with a deposit of a silly Goldschlager T-shirt. You got to make deposits, and you can't wait until, right? It's not about chesed, it's about friendliness. It's about being warm and friendly. I actually have over here, I can give this afterwards. I made bumper stickers. See what that says? I keep that on me. We made this bumper stickers. We have it on our van. It's a simple message that I never saw another bumper sticker say. If you're from, that has to equal that you're friendly, and friendliness creates Kiddush Hashem. So just stick it and remind, whether you see a guy, or you think it was a guy who's actually a Yid, who's thinking of sending his kid to a Jewish day school, and your friendliness is going to be machriya, whatever it is, from equals friendly, every hello, every sweetness is going to create a deposit that one day, when someone needs to make a withdrawal because of the Koach Nefashos, they'll be able to. Okay, so these are free. You can take them afterwards. Shkach.
We have maybe the time for one or two more questions. So one question that's asked is as follows: how, regarding social media networking, meaning Facebook, etc., advocate that, but the question is asked: how is Kiruv dealing with its new challenges? Example: campus life is now quite different because of Facebook, or different challenges that that we are faced with.
I don't know if it's a mother to speak back to back.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Anyway, Klatko is the campus expert.
Klatko is a campus professional, and also he has social, network experience.
Okay. So I'll be quick because there's no real answer here. The truth is, we dance a terrible dance. And we don't really have much of a choice. We all do. People in Avodah Kodesh. On my radio show last week, when we spoke about the internet, I had a young man come on. I said, "Call anonymously." People say, "Oh, what do they need nasifa for?" You don't need nasifa. I said, "Okay." I challenge my callers to call in and tell me Maislach anonymously. Call in. Mm-hmm. The first call was a bacher by the name of Chaim, who somehow got a hold of a miniature iPod Touch that's got internet on it, and he began staying up till 3 a.m, missing shachris, missing first seder, and so on and so forth. And that was the first phone call. But what he said in the beginning of the phone call was, he said, I always heard how bad the internet was, and you shouldn't get a smartphone because it connects to the internet. And then I saw my Rosh Hashiva had one. And I see my Rebbeim have smartphones, and I said, if it's good enough for them, why isn't it good enough for me? We dance a terrible dance. And there's not a really strong answer. Facebook has, there's a tremendous amount of tarfus on Facebook, and yet I'm very active on Facebook, and there are people today who are from because they are nowhere to be found but Facebook. Now, I did create Shabbat.com as a kosher Facebook ad. Rabbi Twersky was kind enough to give me a video okay, as well as Rabbi Feinstein and others. And what I have on Shabbat.com is a disabled photo feature, which is a very strong feature. So you can't go perusing around for pictures of pretty girls. Even so, it's very, very difficult. The answers are very difficult. In my home, although I use it, my Kindlech do not have access to the internet. I have 11 children. They don't. And someone asked me on the radio show, well, what are my kids going to do for entertainment? I said, whatever they did 15 years ago, they'll do it today. Right? Today we've become handicapped. We don't know what to do. I said, at the worst comes to the worst, buy them a computer with no internet connection, and they'll buy them a digital camera. They'll have fun on the camera. They'll make nice pictures. They'll write. They'll be creative, and they won't need it. But there are great dangers, and I look forward to hearing what the Gedolim say.
One more question.
You have a question?
Okay, I have a very specific a question that hopefully I'll get specific answers to. You're all involved in Kiruv. There are many families out there that would like to be involved in Kiruv. They would love to invite people over. One of the fears they have is what's the influence it's going to have on their children. A lot of people today, Baruch Hashem, have large families. My question very specifically is and Rabbi Klatzko, when you talked about Shabbos being a relationship, it was a tremendous, wonderful answer. So it's really directed to the other two members of the panel, or three, if you like that. And that is, what do you do with your children, and how do you present what you're doing with your children in ways that they can appreciate it, and more importantly, not feel that they're being left out? I'm a mental health professional. I meet with a lot of children, and a lot of the issues that come up are, my parents don't notice I'm here. The question is, if you're going to start bringing more people into your house who are not even related, and you just want to experience a Shabbos, how do you do that and let your children feel that they're not left out and they're part of the process?
Let me answer the answer my children gave, who, Baruch Hashem, they're all now married, have their own families, and they have said over and over again that it's true when they were growing up, they sometimes resented all the guests that were at our Shabbos table. Didn't get maybe enough time. They wanted to be able to say their Dvar Torah, and they couldn't. And the guests dominated the conversations. It says every single one says, but what I learned by having that kind of discussion going on at every Shabbos table, to see Achnos Zorchem, to see Ahavas Yisrael, says, in the scope of my life, it has given me that which I've needed to be able to go on and meet the challenges of today's world. So while the moment is uncomfortable, as long as our premise is that we have the Shem Shemaim, the Torah will be Megan, your children will learn more by having people come in than by isolating and protecting them. I just want to add a note, because I thought about it and I said it to myself before we started. The Baal Shem HaKodesh said, before you do a mitzvah, every mitzvah, you have to be mekabel the mitzvah v'hafta l'reacha kamocha. We're about to talk about, I said to myself, we're about to talk about Kiruv. What's the premise? V'hafta l'reacha kamocha. This week's parsha, Parsha Kedoshim. Without the Rambam puts the mitzvah chayach techiach, which is the pasuk before, and mitzvah after Racha K'mecha, right next to each other. He says you cannot reach out and make a change in another person's life without first being Mekayim v'hafta l'reacha k'mecha. Our children see when we care, and our children will see how to care for another Jew, and they learn how we care for each other by learning by example, rather than the hypothetical.
I asked, when I was a few years back, I asked Rav Noah Weinberg himself the question, what do you say to people when they say it's going to affect, it's going to have a negative effect on my family? And then I asked Rav Yitzhak Berkowitz in the same sitting, the same tour of Eretz Israel. So Rav Noah said to me, he said, the best form of defense is attack, right? That if you are ready to bring these people into your home and to care about them, then you're showing your children that this is not something to be afraid of, you know. And Rav Burke was at a similar concept when I said to him. He said to me, who are they trying to kid? Right? That by not bringing these people into their home, they're going to protect them from the outside influence. You just have to walk outside today. It's all around you. By bringing people into your home, you're showing you have to prepare your children. Of course you do. You tell your children that these are members of Klal Yisrael. They don't know any better. They're our brothers and sisters. We have to show them the beauty of Yiddishkeit that we're zocher to have. Right? And you share that with them. I just saw recently, in the last week, a film that was an old film made in England. It wasn't made in England, made by Rabbi Grunfeld from Seed, of interview with Rav Scheinberg Zatzal, who he asked him this question: what do people say when you bring them for Shabbos and it's going to have a negative influence? He just said, it won't. It won't have a negative influence. It won't have a negative influence. Then there's another film which he made, Rav Shlomo Volby, same question. He said, it won't bring them down. It will be machazek them. So then, why are you asking your question if that's the case? So I think the answer is that when a person's involved in kiruv, there are stories, there's no question, there's people who are kiruv professionals have problems with their children, right? There's no questions about it. So I'm not judging anybody, but all I can say is that you have to make it, like Rabbi Twersky is saying, and that you indicated in your question, caring has to start. You've got to care about your children as much, or really more, than anybody else. And your children know that. So if you're sharing this with them, and you're making them feel that they're first, and you're making them share their divrei Torah with everybody else, they'll feel the love from you. If they're feeling from you that you don't care about them, you're meshugal osadaba, the only thing you care about those kids, I don't care about my family, you're going to have problems. But if you're a healthy individual, meaning kiruv doesn't take away the everyday problems that anybody has. A kiruv professional, whoever he is not a perfect human being, and has own issues and so on and so forth. So yes, you have to start with your family and care about them, but if you bring them into it, and certainly you give them the attention that there's no reason why this should be negative. Just something to note, that you should keep your eyes open all the time. If you see that there is a problem, don't ignore it. And I think that can also go on. If you see that there's a kid that is being affected, then you've got to stop, or you've got to do something. You've got to deal with it, right? You can't just keep, put on the blinkers and ignore it. But in general, what it seems to be, the Gedolei Yisrael seem to be saying, that when you do this, if you do it in the right way, with sensitivity, with Avos Yisrael, it will be mechazik your children more than anything.
The question was not addressed to me, so I'm not going to give a long answer. But I just want to tell you one thing based on what Rabbi Sampson said, which is the best defense is a good offense. What I do with my children, we have a lot of guests each week from ridiculously different backgrounds. What I do is we actually have a meeting before each Shabbos, and I tell them what to expect, what their job will be. This week we had a Herzliya school from Montreal, which is one of those dreadful community schools that have been around for 100 years, where there's nobody who has a clue what they're doing, 500 Jewish kids. So they came, so I explained to them what a community school was, what to expect, what to be careful about, and they felt very involved before we ever began. And the second thing is, my kids sit next to me, and I don't care, even though some of my younger kids leave the table, which creates this gap between me and the guests, like a few seats away, my kids have to know that they're the priority. So I protect my kids' seats, which could be a lot, because I have 8 sons, so when they're all home, that means the very first guest is 9 seats away, but I don't care, because the lesson the guests will get, as well as my own kids will get, is that they are my priority.
Beautiful.
Yeah, we're going to wrap it up. I will echo that I never moved my son's seats next door to me. He was always sitting right next to me, and we've had tons of... So keep them in the fold, keep them connected with you, have the meetings. I wish we had gotten to all the questions. If you have any personal questions, you can come to the Rabbonim who are up here now. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Rabbi Twersky, Rabbi Sampson, Rabbi Klatzko for an outstanding panel.